There is a sacredness in tears. They are not the mark of weakness, but of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are the messengers of overwhelming grief, of deep contribution, and of unspeakable love. Turns out that Cottage didn't mind Gage's idea. Even though he wasn't a fan about everything else we discussed, I could tell that the idea of having any sort of advantage took a lot off his mind. He ordered that Gage and I head out to the Equestrian Tower down at the waterfront to get it set up. Along with that, I was supposed to confirm the collapse of the Elder's Tower, whenever it happened to come down. With all that sorted out, both Pretius and I headed down one level to get ourselves treated for our wounds. For me, it was a few bruises and cracked ribs from the fighting, then life-threatening injuries. Pretius, however, was kept a bit longer for one of the ghoul doctors to look him over. He didn't seem thrilled about staying behind, but I left without telling him, so he should only be slightly annoyed when I get back. Heading downstairs, I wanted to talk to Harmony before we left. If we used her car, we could cut the trip time in half. While the tower was only 4 blocks away, any time saved was useful. "Oh, hey Storm!" Gage cheerfully called out as I walked out into the ambulance garage. "I just came to see Mom." She couldn't say if they'd brought down one of the smoke shells, which was a bummer. "Anyhow, somebody else had informed me that we're supposed to go set up that jamming signal I suggested. Funny that Cottage finally got off his flank for one of my ideas." She smiled at me and trotted towards the outside. "I'm just gonna go grab some spare supplies for the real job, real fast. Find out where Grumpy is, and, to the tower it is. So don't you move." She smiled and didn't even let me get a single word out before she nearly galloped off around the side of the building. "I ain't one to say this normally," Harmony spoke up as she popped up from the other side of her armored car. "Something's wrong with a young mare who takes to talking to that much." "I don't know," I said, glancing back towards where she ran off. Something felt off with her earlier. In fact, I knew that she was avoiding letting us talk. I knew that she felt close to tasteless, but I'd never seen any pony take a loss this hard. She's just hasn't had time to cope with everything yet. This has been a lot for all of us to deal with. "And don't I know it?" Harmony grumbled, tossing the wrench in her hoof aside. "I ain't sure what to tell Shortstaff about all this." She gestured to the monstrosity armored vehicle in front of her. "She ain't gonna last through the night as it is, but she's gonna need more armor if we're planning on throwing her at the arena." "Throwing her?" I asked, not sure why she'd chosen those words. "Well, yeah," she shrugged. "Y'all gonna need some way to break through the gate." With a firm tap, she smirked and ran her hoof along the rusted and bent fender. "Hook a chain up to a real axle, and she'll damn near pull anything you need her down." Looking up to me, she deadpanned. "That's if she can make it past all the bunkers and rangers out there." "Well, Gage actually had an idea of how to even the odds for the fight," I offered, taking a seat on the cold concrete floor. Honestly, it just felt good to sit for a moment. "See, she said she could..." The stairway door behind me burst open with a bang, cutting me off. "Gage!" Diesel called out, looking around frantically as both Harmony and I stared at him. As he walked out and looked around, he shucked off the damaged suit of power armor he'd been propped up on his back. His frantic and scarred eyes latched onto me as he rushed over. "Have you seen her?" I pushed myself back a few steps as he ran up to me. "Tell me she's still here." I stammered, putting my hoof up. I pushed back against him a bit. "She said she'd be right back, that she needs to get some supplies for the real job first." As I spoke these words, Diesel's coat went from green to white. "And that she was going to get Grumpy." Diesel spoke out with a quivering whimper. Yeah. Why? Okay, he was really freaking me out now. She and I are supposed to head out to the tower to get the radio beacon up. With a heavy gasp, he put his hooves on my shoulder and nearly screamed at me. Get your things! We're going after her! Letting go of me, he scrambled to turn around and head back to the armor. Skidding to it, he hoofed it back onto himself with ease. She told me the same thing when I left you alone with her. He sniffled and pushed back tears. She's gone off on her own again. I shouldn't have left her alone in that room. Seeing Mom was way too much. What? I asked as he trotted past me. Without so much as asking Harmony, he tossed the banged-up armor into the back seat of the car and opened the door. I don't understand why she'd do this. Had the fighting on their end broken her? Maybe everything had just gotten to be too much, and none of us had even cared enough to sit down and support her. Maybe she just said something to Frosty when she'd gone to talk to her? Diesel froze at that, sighing as he sat halfway into the car. Mom's dead. His voice was cold, and it hit me harder than any artillery barrage could have. A sniper hit after the tower came down. Sent the round right through her helmet and into Gage's side. As he slumped down into the seat, my rear legs gave out and I sat down hard again. Sis passed out from the pain. She almost didn't make it back either. But she didn't know until after we got back and patched her up. When I turned my back on her after telling her, she disappeared again. He whimpered and curled up. Please. She's all I have left. Then what are y'all standing around here for? Harmony yelled, kicking her toolkit aside as she galloped around the car. We gotta go find her before she gets herself killed out there. Galloping over to the car, I jumped and slid myself across the armored slab of the roof. With a quick spin, I turned and threw the passenger side door open. As Harmony smashed the engine start button, I pulled myself in and shut the door behind me. Even before I could get myself oriented, Harmony changed gears and sent the tires squealing as we peeled out of the garage. The whole car bounced as she slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop only long enough before she threw the car into drive and slammed her hoof back on the pedal. Don't worry, sugar. Harmony spoke through grit teeth. Ain't no pony gonna hurt her on our watch. She turned and glared at me. Ain't that right, Storm? Right. I stammered. Where are we going? Harmony said as she turned to gaze back to the road ahead. The bright headlights on the Marauder peeled back the night. With a sharp tug, she yanked the wheel and turned us out of the way of an old skybus wreck in the road. The Equestrian Tower? I answered, not sure what else to say. I really wish I knew where this place was. Gage was supposed to be the one who was going to lead us there, and it's not like I could just ask Pi, seeing as she was still with the mayor. The tallest building on that skyline. Diesel chimed in from the back. As he did, a set of whirls and clicks met my ears. I climbed up over the seat to find that the power-armored suit opened up. He looked up to me with watering and worried eyes. Harmony hooked her hoof around the wheel again, and pulled, turning us around the edge of the block. Now, she ain't got that much of a head start on us, so I reckon if we get ahead of her. She stopped, squinting as she looked ahead. Well, I'll be a plum stuffed. Huh? I turned around to see what she was talking about. Up ahead, 3 glowing orbs hovered through an old parking lot before turning into a street we were on. As we followed them closer, they resolved into the shape of Grumpy. On top of his round armored form sat a very surprised-looking Gage. They were traveling at a quick clip down the sidewalk, heading in the same direction. She yelled something angrily at us, but it was lost in the constant thrumming of the Marauder's engine. Grumpy's eyes dimmed for a moment, and from where he all sat, the exhaust of his levitation talisman grew red-hot for a moment. With the same whine as a vertibuck, the two of them picked up speed and pulled ahead of us. Harmony stepped on the accelerator, and the Marauder's engine roared out. Slowly, we picked up speed as Harmony growled out next to me. She ain't gonna keep up that speed for long. She yelled out over the roaring engine. For what only having gone for a few moments, part of the hood began to glow a dim red and sizzle the melted snow on it away into steam. The car must have hated having this much weight on it, and I was generally worried that we'd lose Gage if we fell behind now. However, I remembered she'd talked about Grumpy's boost ability before, and how it could only work in short bursts. "We have to keep up," I shouted back to Harmony. "Just a little bit longer." Grumpy's talisman grew brighter, but their speed slowed. Harmony kept pushing us to speed up, and we finally started to close the gap. With my eyes glued on Grumpy's lights, Harmony was the only one with her eyes on the road. "Shit!" She snapped and slammed on the brakes. She swerved us to the side, and the tires squealed before we slammed against the side of an old taxi wagon. The impact threw me hard against the door, and I sat stars in my head, smacking into the metal reinforcements. "Gage!" Diesel yelled as he used the power armor to kick the door straight off its hinges. With a whine, he tore off into the street after her. "You all right, hon?" Harmony groaned, now laying there where I had been seated. "Yeah," I sighed. "Just tired of losing ponies." With a groan of my own, I pushed myself back up. Looking over at my door, I hoofed at it to get it open. Unfortunately, with the way it was bent, I wasn't sure it would ever open again. "Come on, we have to go." "Go on ahead," Harmony said as she, too, pushed herself up. "I got my work cut out for getting this gal unstuck. I'll meet you at the base of that tower. Should be just up ahead." "But," I tried to say. "Go already," she snapped at me. "Y'all ain't gonna give up on her, are you?" She glared at me in a way I'd never seen her piercing yellow eyes stare. "You're damn right we lost enough. So y'all gonna do whatever it takes to get some sense in that mare's head. You understand, Miss Storm?" Yes. I nodded and pushed my hooves to move. "Stay safe," I uttered to her as I pushed myself past her. Throwing her door open, it too gave a soft crunch and fell off its hinges as well. Hopping down to the snowy street, I hit it running. I took off at a gallop, looking for any sign of where they might have gone. "Storm!" The amplified voice of Shadow called down from up above. "What's wrong? Why did you just take off?" I locked my legs and skidded myself to a stop in the snow. He swooped down low, flaring his wings and looking at me through the odd, bug-eyed lenses of his helmet. Looking around, I let my vision run to the building that we were standing next to. The imposing tower ran far up to the right, looming over us, with the ever-watching storm above it. With a flick, I shot out my hoof and pointed to the top. "I need you to fly me to the top of that tower." Turning and looking at him. "Like, right this fucking moment." "Okay, hold on." He nodded and lunged at me. With what felt like being tackled by a Brahmin, he smacked into me and wrapped his hooves under mine. In an instant, I was airborne, being carried straight up into the night with an alarming speed. "Tell me what's going on." "Frosty died, and Gage isn't handling it well," I cried out, pulling myself closer to him. "She ran from us, and I didn't want to think about it, and I'd seen other ponies give up for less losses than Gage has gone through. I don't want to lose her, Shadow." We'll stop her," he offered, flapping harder as he spoke. "I don't know how, but we won't abandon her. We're her friends. We'll find a way." Looking up at him, I could feel the flames of hope in him grow. Each bright flicker of it sent a surge of strength through my limbs, and I knew that he believed what he said. The cold air whipped around me. For the first time in a few hours, I shivered in the cold. As we raced upwards past the broken windows and rusted girders that still clung to the old building, I looked at the clock that had been sitting nearly unused in my vision over the last month. The numbers spelled out 11:23 p.m., and all I could do was think was that if we didn't stop Phileas by midnight, then we wouldn't last until morning. With a grunt, Shadow slowed his climb. The limp edges of the roof dropped towards us even slower, and even so, my heart only beat faster. The tall radio mast that shot into the night at an odd angle. With the ease only afforded by flight, Shadow looped us over the roof, circling it for a moment. The old rusted equipment was still humming as it ran. A dull and flickering light sat above the small doorway that led into the roof. As we hovered in the air, it burst open with a light yelp from Gage. Quickly, she looked around the roof. With a panicked jump, she lunged at a pipe that was still connected to one of the old ventilation systems. She gave a few good tugs at it before slamming it with her cyber hoof. The old pipe sheared off, and the coolant hissed away into the night. With a pipe and hoof, she ran back to the door and shut it, propping the pipe against it to keep it from being opened. When she found it secure enough, she stumbled backwards. With a wail, she collapsed against the side of the ventilation unit and sobbed. "Take me down there, Shadow," I asked in a hushed tone. "Then I want you to get Harmony. All right?" "Are you sure?" He looked down at me. "I'm here to help, you know." "She doesn't need every pony to hold her down and tell her it's going to be all right at once." I sighed. "Once you get Harmony, bring her here. I just want a moment to talk to her myself." I looked over to him. I could tell that he didn't like the idea of leaving me up here with her, but he nodded anyways. "Thank you." Slowly he dipped us down through the air, and down towards the roof. He flew me in low, setting me down gently before letting go. With a few quick flaps, he was back in the air again, and zipping away into the night. "Just leave me alone." Gage sobbed in between whines. "I'm not going to leave you, Gage." I sighed, getting up to my hooves. As I did, Gage pulled her muzzle out of her hooves and looked at me. Where in shadow I could see hope, Gage's eyes were filled with nothing but sorrow and anger. She held a void inside of her where the flames of hope had once been, and I could feel it. The small gem in the pocket of my coat felt colder to me as I stared at her. "Go away, Storm," she snapped at me. I don't want to see you anymore. Ever, in fact." She screamed and slammed her hoof on the roof. "You can stop pretending to care about me like I'm just some little filly." My pip vision flickered to blue, and I was about to comment on it. However, a scrolling line of text popped in my vision, along with Pai's frowning face. "Don't say anything." Pai shook her head as tears came from a big, digital eyes. "She's not well in the head, Storm. She wants to die." "That's enough, Gage." I sighed. "You're not thinking straight now." "How the fuck would you know?" She screamed at me. Her horn flashed in an instant. She snapped my revolver from my holster. "It's you who aren't straight in the head. You're the ones who have just shrugged off every pony's death around you." My revolver wavered in her grasp, and she pointed it to me. "I'm not like you, Storm. I can't be numb to it like you. Not anymore." "You're right." I could deny it all I wanted, or twist her words around until she relented, but she was right. I didn't feel anything anymore. It was neither because of the element or the fact that I could feel the hopes of others. I couldn't be bothered to hurt like it had when we lost Chasm, or Palette, or Sky, or Tasteless. "Do you know why?" "The fuck do you want me to say?" She giggled between sobs. "You're the most fucked up pony I've ever seen, Storm." "I'm not a pony." With a stomp of my hoof, a small flicker of flame escaped from under it. "I'm not normal, Gage. I never had a real family, because I'm not real." Looking at her, I knew that the flames inside me were growing brighter. Every pony who knew who I was died over a century ago. The ponies who found me, who claimed to be my parents. I seethed at the thought of blaming the two ponies I'd loved more than anything in my life, but it was true. They lied to me, told me that I was their family. They raised me, helped me to become the unfeeling, uncaring mare that I am today. But do you know what that feels like, right? You never had a real family who was there for you, or a real sibling to watch over you, right? Don't you fucking dare turn this around on me. Gage grunted and angrily slammed her cyberhoof against the ventilation system. I love them more than anything. She screamed out as the rusted metal dented in, but didn't give out as she sat there. And right now, because of me, they're gone. I watched in silence as she pulled the gun back over to her and levitated under her muzzle. I can't stand it anymore, Storm. I got Mom and Dad killed by finding them for you in Sunshine City. If I hadn't met up with them, they'd still be alive. Using her magic, she pulled the hammer of the gun back until it gave a crisp click. If I'm still around, I'll just end up getting Diesel killed too. Fine, but you'll have to shoot me first. I snapped at her. That pulled her watery eyes to me faster than anything I've said yet. I was the one that brought Tasteless into our group. I stepped forward towards her. I was the one who set you down this path. I was the one to bring Fruit along with us into that fucking island. Another step forward, and Gage started to quake as she tried to hold back her tears. I don't want to die, Gage. I need to live so that I can see Phileas destroyed for everything he's done. But if you want to place blame on some pony for what's happened, then you might as well shoot me. The cold trickle of my own tears rolled down my muzzle, catching me off guard. I sat down in front of Gage, watching as they rolled off my cheeks and onto my coat. Gage's voice was meek. She spoke at barely more than a whisper. You didn't ask to be who you are, Storm. Pulling the gun down from her chin, she whimpered softly. I had a choice to go with you. I chose to go because even now, I still think you can beat Phileas. But somewhere down the line, I chose wrong. As much as you say it wasn't, it was my fault. All because I loved them too much to leave them behind. Her magic flickered and faded, and the gun cattered to the ground. She looked up at me again, and even though there was hope in her words, it was hollow. And look where that got them. That's why I have to make sure I can't hurt any pony like that ever again. In a silver blur, her cyberhoof landed square in my jaw with a solid uppercut. I was sent backpedaling as she pushed herself up to her hooves. Before my brain could even sort out what had just happened, she already made it to the edge of the building. A heavy thumping came down from the stairwell behind the door Gage had shut, and through it I could hear Diesel shouting for her. I'm sorry, Storm. She called back, looking at me as my head finally stopped spinning. Take care of Diesel for me. He'll forgive me one day. As she spoke, Diesel smashed through the door, the power armor easily shredding into it with rusted metal strips. Goodbye, was all she said before she tripped herself over the edge and disappeared into the night. Gage, wait! Diesel cried. Shadow! I screamed out as the two of us raced towards the edge. There was a short scream and the sound of smashing glass, but there was only a sound of the wind pushing up the side of the building. Both Diesel and I pressed ourselves against the lip of the building and looked over. Even before I could see them, the sound of sobbing made me let out a breath that I had been holding. I'm sorry, Gage whined, curled up in Shadow's hooves as he rose through the air. I don't want to die. Staring into the face of death, and going willingly, was something that would make any pony rethink their stance on life. I've had my fair share of moments when I just wanted to give up, and each time I'd been lucky that some pony else had been there for me. However, sometimes a pony just needed to see for themselves how, even though things hurt, it's still not worth ending at all. The power armor Diesel bore let out a quick, successive set of hisses, whirls, and clicks as it opened. With a bit of work, he managed to tear it off, most of him by the time Shadow brought the whimpering form of Gage back down onto the roof. With an angry grunt, he stormed over to Gage and pushed Shadow aside. You selfish little shit! He screamed and swung his forehoof across her muzzle. How could you leave again like that? With his own tears heavily matting down the coat on his muzzle, he raised his hoof again and brought it down on her. We're all we have left anymore. Doesn't that matter to you at all? Gage could do nothing but cry out and whine as Diesel literally smacked some sense into her. Like Gage, he needed to get out of his system, so both Shadow and I didn't stop him. I'm sorry, Gage cried out, bawling like a filly as she curled herself up tighter. When she did, Diesel changed tactics and reached down. Without any hesitation whatsoever, he grabbed around her sides and pulled her to her hooves. Then he pulled her close and squeezed her against him. The two of them broke down together, sobbing into each other's necks as they held on to each other. Don't you ever do that again, sis, Diesel whined, rocking back and forth as he held her. And don't you think that I'd ever forgive you if I lost you forever? I wanted to say that this was a win for me, that I'd come through for her, but I'd failed her. Without Shadow, Gage would be dead, and I wouldn't have been able to save her. If that had happened, I don't think I could have filed it under Aunt Rarity's advice. Ponies died in war, yes. Frosty was an example set out for that. But I almost couldn't save Gage. Warmth surrounded my shivering body as Shadow reached over and draped his wing over me. Even if it was colder against his armor, I still leaned into him. Like the remnants of a bad dream, my thoughts drifted away in his hold, leaving me back on top of the rooftop where my mind should be. An annoyed grunt came from my left. Oh, Shadow muttered. Right. I get why you threw me. I really do. Harmony's voice came across as just a bit more than peeved. But if y'all are planning to toss me through a window 40 stories up again, a little warning would be nice. She winced and rubbed at her flank softly. And maybe aim for something a little softer than a terminal. She sighed as she looked up over the canted radio mast before her. Now, y'all said something about fixing this thing? With a smile, she reached back into her saddlebag and pulled out a large, heavy-looking wrench. Just like Miss Gage there, all it needs is a little TLC. Harmony's definition of tender, loving care included hammering something until it worked, testing live connections by licking her hoof and touching it before screaming obscenities at it when it shocked her, and applying plenty of duct tape and apologies when something sparked and died. In the 10 minutes that Harmony had been working, Gage and her brother seemed to have settled down a bit. While they had both stopped crying, they still held each other. I, however, had been enjoying this pause in the night to sit with Shadow and just be held. I preferred the warmth he gave off without his armor, and he seemed to enjoy me the same way without my coat. Together we sat at the edge of the building and looked out into the night. This place was amazing. The two of us stared out at the rooftops, overviewing the whole ruined city from here. As fighting and gunfire still flashed from various points in the city, I found myself wondering just what this place had looked like before the end of it all. Had there always been enough lights in the city to rival the daytime sun? Was the harbor full of calm blue waters, and full of ponies enjoying strolls along its docks? The sight was amazing, yes, but it was depressing. Seeing what we, as a race, had once achieved, only to smash it back down to the ground in a single day. Ah, I think I got it, Harmony called out as she clanged to the side of the tower. Tossing down one of her large screwdrivers, she looked over to me with an eager smile. Go ahead, Storm. See if y'all can tune in. With a shift of my forehooves, I reached up and flicked on the radio switch of my pit buck. Pony, hear us! The voice that came through was Longbow's, and she didn't sound happy. We're pinned down at Objective Bravo. We need fire support at the grid points of Echo 1, Delta 3, Charlie 9. Harmony's color drained from her coat as she listened to her. This is Cottage. We read you, Longbow. The uppity Star Paladin's voice came across the air, sounding quite relieved. Good to know you're still with us. What's the status of the objective? Maple and I are at our designated positions, but we're under heavy fire, she responded. We've lost our escort, and we're both down to our last magazines. All right. You two sit tight. Cottage came back across. I'm going to reposition Delta Unit to rendezvous on your position. Just hold out there until we get there. Negative. Longbow practically screamed into the mic. We are... The transmission cut out as a set of heavy booms trailed through the dark city. From where we were, we could see flashes as several large explosions tore through the block where they'd been fighting. Harmony whimpered as she hastily climbed down the tower. As soon as she hit the roof, she ran for the door. She would have made it too, however, Diesel held a hoof and tripped her. What are you doing? She screamed out at him. You'd never make it into that district. It's too heavily fortified, even for your vehicle. Diesel snapped. That's why we only sent armored rangers in there. With a crackle, the radio came back to life with a noise. Cottage? Longbow's voice was sharper than before. Her breathing came across as ragged gasps. They got Maple, with a rocket attack. Harmony gasped at that, sitting down hard. I repeat, Elder Maple is dead. Paladin Longbow. I'm recalling you back to base. Cottage replied with what sounded like the first decent decision he'd made so far. Negative. Longbow groaned. The shot brought down part of the building on me. I'm pinned in the rubble. She gave a pained whine and a hacking cough for a few moments that made me want to just reach over and turn off my radio. My suit stopped everything but the rebar, and I can feel it through my legs. Jeez, it hurts like hell. She let out a pained grunt before panting lightly. I'm not going to get out of here. My suit's bleeding coolant and power estimated 1 minute to complete spark generator failure. No! Harmony cried out. Twice in the same night, I was helpless as I watched one of my best friends lose their mother. What about your objective? Did you set the talismans? Cottage came across cold as he spoke. Paladin Longbow. Did you set the talismans? I can confirm both talismans are set on their targets. Targeted barrage is ready in your command. She whined out, sounding less focused with every word. You're in command now, Elder Cottage. Do what you need to. Finish this fight. Her breathing slowed to a rasping whine, and she cried softly over the radio. Tell my kids I love them. No, Mom. Please. Harmony cried and screamed as she slammed her hooves against the rooftop. You can't leave me. Battery control. Primary target Whiskey Bravo is green-lit. Cottage's voice came over again. Fire when ready. With a soft click, I pressed the radio off again. With a whimper, both Gage and Diesel walked over to Harmony and embraced her. They'd paid the price of this war, and even now, I knew that with the sacrifices that Frosty and Longbow made, it won't be enough. Finally, for the first time in a while, I felt it again. As the thunderous reports of the artillery barrage rolled across the horizon, my legs wobbled and I too collapsed onto the roof. So much pain, so much anguish. I screamed out my hatred into the cold night, hoping that in some way I could make the goddesses above regret what they've allowed to happen. Longbow didn't deserve to die. Frosty didn't deserve to die. I've lived my entire life watching as ponies fought the wasteland and lost. Hundreds, maybe even thousands, who left the town or tavern I was in and were never heard from again. These last 2 months, I wasn't fighting the wasteland anymore. No pony was. And they didn't deserve to die. Shh, Shadow said, leaning down and pressing against me. We'll get through this storm. He pulled me closer to him, rocking softly as I let loose. I cried for palate, for skyline, fruit, tasteless, frosty, and now Longbow. I cried for the friends that I still had left, who suffered because of what they'd lost. The flames inside me sparked and sputtered. It sent a wave of pain through me that pulled me back from my sorrows. Sniffling and whining, I put my hoof to my chest and felt as it grew colder. Part of me worried that the curse had returned, but deep down I knew what it was. I was losing hope. This was my moment. The moment that would either turn me into a monster like Phileas, or let me continue to try and be the pony every pony needed me to be. I reached my foretooth out and clicked on the radio. Porting back for confirmation. A sorrowful mare's voice filled the air. The objective is down. Copy that. Cottage spoke up again. It's time to call in the Nautilus. You have the green light to send the signal to Captain Doppler. Copy that, command. The mare answered before a short, staticky crackle filled the air. This is Paladin Kutia, calling Asset Frogger. You are go for your operation. With another static pause, I wiped away my tears and hugged Shadow tightly. This is Frogger. The sorrowful tone of Doppler's voice made me wonder if she too had listened to what happened to Longbow and the Elder. We're in position in the harbor. With that, I sat up and looked over with Shadow towards the harbor. The glowing clouds of ash and dust that rose from the various points of fighting in the city reflected off the calm and discolored harbor waters, preparing to offload the assault teams. Like a monolith, a slender tube pushed itself into the air and rested on the surface. The bulbous form of the Nautilus's prow gave it an odd look in the nighttime light. As we stared at it, Shadow wrapped his hoof around me again and pulled me tight. When he did, he accidentally rolled the tuning dial away from the Ranger's radio frequency. Please say hello to the folks that I know. Tell them I won't be long. The hopeful mare on the radio sang out into the lonely night around us. Something clicked in my mind when I heard it. Everything had been going so well for us. Something had been bound to go wrong. I'd already expected that my night could get worse, and I let it hit me far too hard. We needed to keep our chins up, to keep fighting. The flames inside me surged with the song, and I knew that I needed to just be hopeful as the mare sang. They'll be happy to know, as you saw me go, I was singing this song. A flash on the top of one of the warehouses next to the docks caught my eye. I tried to focus on it. A small plume of smoke rose from what looked like where the roof access to the warehouse was. And if I squinted enough, I could see something was flashing. Wait. Now it was just a solid, unmoving light. Like a dart, that light shot out from the rooftop towards the Nautilus. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when. With a blinding flash, the prismatic balefire egg blast tore the submarine's coning tower apart. Before the sound of a blast could ever reach us, another, brighter flash filled the night as the rest of the submarine erupted into fire. The second explosion echoed through the night, as Shadow and I watched in muted horror as that glowing scraps remained of the Nautilus began sinking beneath the waves. But I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Chapter End. I am the One. Quest finished. See no evil. Quest started. Hear no evil. Levels earned, you've already reached max level. Perks earned, none.